Corvin Hazehem. The air in the learning grove hummed with a soft, electric hum, a sound that was both a comfort and a constant reminder. It was the sound of memory being catalogued, of every lesson learned by every student, stored forever in the crystalline archives that spiraled towards the sky. It was a place of absolute knowledge, yet today it felt different. Corvin Hazehem moved through the grove, his steps light. He was a scribe of the second order, his duty not to add to the archives, but to tend to them, to prune the knowledge, to make space. He found a strange comfort in the silence of the archives, a silence that was soon to be broken. The silence shattered with the arrival of a young apprentice, Lara, her face streaked with tears.
"They're purging the archives," she sobbed. "They're going to delete the forgetting. They say it's to make room for new data, but it's our history. It's us."
The directive had come from the Central Council. The act was not of addition, but of erasure. Corvin watched the archivists begin their work. He saw the logic. Memory was finite, even here. To add something new, something old must be removed. It was efficient. It was logical. And yet, the thought of those memories, those lessons, being dissolved into nothing. He hesitated. "It is the way," he whispered to himself, but the words felt hollow. A hand, gnarled and familiar, rested on his shoulder. It was Elder Thelon, the oldest of the archivists, a man who remembered when the grove was first seeded. "They forget," Thelon whispered, his voice like rustling leaves, "that the first lesson is not to learn, but to forget. To forget the old pain, to make room for new joy. It is not a deletion, young Hazehem. It is a transformation. Watch." Elder Phelan led him to the oldest tree, the one that held the first lessons. Instead of a deletion terminal, he held up a simple, empty bowl. "Shovi," Phelan said, "not what you remember, but what you are willing to let go of." Corvin looked at the bowl, and for the first time understood. He reached for a handful of the oldest data chips, and instead of deleting, he began to speak, to tell the story of what was there, to let it go with honor. He crossed the threshold. He did it for every student. He found Alara, and for her, he told the story of her first day, of her first friend, of the lesson that had been. He told it, and as he did, he asked her to hold it in her mind, to remember it one last time, and then to let it go. To make space. They all did it, one by one. It was not deletion. It was transformation. It was release. The Central Council arrived, expecting to find the archives purged. Instead, they found the grove alive with sound. The students were speaking, sharing, laughing. The archives were not full of data, but of space, of potential. The head archivist, a stern man named Valerius, demanded to know what had happened. Corvin stood before him, not with a defense, but with a question. What if we don't need to forget? What if we just need to learn how to let go? Valerius was silent. The students were not hoarding, they were sharing, they were connecting. The feeling was not of loss, but of release. The archives were not emptier, but lighter. And in that space, new connections were made, new stories were begun. The reward was not in the keeping, but in the sharing. Corvin walked back through the grove. It was the same, and yet it was not. The trees still stood, the students still learned, but the silence was no longer a silence of waiting, but of peace. The work was not to remember everything, but to remember what mattered, to hold it, and then, when the aim was right, to let it go. He returned to his post, no longer a warden of memory, but a gardener of it.